If I could ask a favor when we first start out, I'd just like to go down the line. If you could introduce yourself to the camera so I know who's who here. And so we'll start with you.
I'm Don Veach.
Okay. And how do you spell your last name?
V's and Victor, E-A-T-C-H.
E-A-C. Okay, great. And what was your position on the X-15?
Mainly developing instrumentation for special project functions.
Oh, okay. And how long were you on the program?
Well, wasn't strictly on the program. I developed instrumentation for it all the way through, but never really worked on the program per se.
Okay. Yeah, you worked at NASA, so you were on many different programs throughout your career.
I developed instrumentation for a flight test. So.
Okay. Yeah. How long were you with NASA? When did you start there?
Started in '52 and retired. Oh gosh. I think it was about 48, 49.
49 now.
49.
Okay. All right. And Bill?
Bill Dana. You want to ask the questions, or you want me to?
Oh, just give me a quick background. I know you were, I think you always are proud of the fact that you were the first NASA employee, is that right?
That's right. I went to work at NASA on October 1st, 1958, and that just happened to be the day that NACA became NASA. And nobody thought it was a big deal. Everybody was looking forward to being NASA. It was a change, and it looked like a step up. So it was kind of an upper going in that day. Coincidentally, my first project as a research engineer was to pilot a rudimentary simulation of the X-15. And I worked in that all the time until I moved into the pilot's office, and I think I continued flying the simulator, the X-15 simulator, after I moved to the pilot's office. I was on the operations end of the program a long time before I got to fly the airplane. I threw out the smoke on the first flight.
Oh.
Scott Cosfield's first flight, I threw the smoke out to give the pilot wind direction and some idea of its velocity. I flew chase on the X-15, and I may have mission controlled once or twice just before I went into the program. I flew my first flight on November 4th, 1965, and I flew the last flight of the program October 24th, 1968.
Very cool. Okay. Now, when you went out and threw the smoke out, were you out there like at NASA One? Was it the vehicle, or were you out of there in a pickup truck?
I had
or
an international pickup, as I remember, and a whole bunch of smoke grenades. And somebody went out there with me, but I can't remember who that was.
Okay. Very neat. How far away were you from the actual touchdown point?
Oh, a mile long. You'd have had to slide a mile further to get to me.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks, Bill. Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, let's see. Bill, I mean, where do you want to start? I started out with the NACA back in '49 at Langley Field.
Oh, I'm sorry for the tape. Your name?
Elder Cordis.
Thank you.
And I worked in the structures lab back there, and my first inkling of the X-15 was we started getting strange-looking black parts, structural parts, to come into the lab to test for various purposes. And that was in the middle '50s. I got involved in structural dynamics and flutter and panel flutter and things like that. And when the X-15 started going supersonic at around Mach 2 or 3 in the early flights, they started having problems with the structure. They had panel flutter on the tail and the panel flutter on the side panels, and a few other little problems like that. So I got talked into coming out to Edwards on a temporary assignment, not to exceed 2 years.
Still here.
And, well, a lot of things happened. We had problems with the windshields cracking on every flight. We had to get Rockwell to finally convince them what the problem was, and they finally redesigned the windshields so they stayed on. We had trouble with the nose gear doors warping and letting hot gases in to blow the tires and do other things, and they finally convinced them what was had to do that. We had problems with skin buckling on the wings when they started going above Mach 3, for about Mach 4, 4.5, somewhere in there, they started having big problems with it. Every time they come back, there'd be big buckles on the skin. And finally convinced Rockwell they had to do something about that. Early in the program, we started having a problem with landing gear starting to be overstressed. So we got in problems in the landing dynamics, and discovered that one of the problems there was that the flight control system, when the main gear touched down, it did a rapid pitch down onto the nose gear, and the stability augmentation system called for high maximum elevator, nose up elevator, and then since they were sitting right over the top of the gear, all they were doing was driving the elevators were just driving the gear into the lake bed, and not raising the nose at all because they were back on the top, right over the top of the gear. And the gear was not at the center, just behind the center of gravity. It was clear at the tail end of the airplane. So we finally got smart and put a squat switch in the landing gear so that the augmentation system wouldn't go to full elevator instantaneously on touching down, and ran out of landing gear problems. And so on and on and on. And then mentioning the strain gauge problems, we were trying to get flight loads off of the airplane, and trying to convince people that most of the lift on the X-15 was body lift and not wing lift. And kept blaming the strain gauges, saying the strain gauges weren't right. They weren't measuring the roads right. And even at subsonic speeds, before we got into the high temperature areas, the gauges were working, but we couldn't convince people that low loads on the wing were what it was doing. I mean, that's the way it was supposed to. So all the lift was on the body.
The plane had the rails going back there to give it additional lift.
Yeah.
Just-
Well, the whole side panel, the
Straight. They call them strakes in those days?
yeah, I forgot what they actually called them, but they were the tunnels that all the control gear,
The fairings,
the
yeah.
control system, and all the wiring and
That
all
was
the
a great
plumbing
design
and
at that time.
everything ran through those tunnels,
Yeah.
and that made the fuselage almost a lifting body. And so the wing was just kind of there to stabilize things, and the loads.
Yeah, a lot of the X-planes that had come before that, the X1, X2, things like that, the systems tunnels were on the top and the bottom, which didn't do anything for lift. And so, yeah, it was a brilliant design thing to put those on the side and add to the lift.
Not only that, it was the beginning of the bathtub design.
Beginning of what?
Bathtub design.
Oh, yes.
When you broadened it out.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it was, it was a lot of, we got involved in a lot of problems like that. And so it was a very interesting program. This is to make a long story short. At the end of the 2 years, we still had problems, and I was still at Edwards. And when I finally retired, I retired from Edwards.
Still having problems.
Never did get back to Langley.
You never solved any problems.
Well, that was it, job security.
Now, when you were at Langley, were you involved in the X-15 at all? I knew they did some testing back there.
Well, I was working in the structures lab, and we had components that were sent by Rockwell back for structural testing. Because we had radiant heat facilities that could run high temperature tests at that time, and so that was the first. I wasn't involved in those tests, but I I saw the parts there, and everybody kept saying, well, I said, you know, say, what's that? Well, don't tell anybody.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But, it was a great program, and I think I met some interesting people I think I ever knew within NASA. Most of us that ended up being there for a while wouldn't fit in anywhere else. So I had to stay.
That's what they used to do, they sent them out to Mojave.
Yeah.
Langley.
Yeah. Well, Mojave started in Langley. It was a branch of the
Yeah.
flight
Yeah.
division back there.
And they said to a number of people that we knew, you're only gonna be there a little while.
Yeah.
They
Well,
were there for
originally-
years.
Originally, Langley would send people out there on a particular project. They come out on well, maybe for 6 months, maybe for a year, but they always went back. And somehow or another, I didn't get in that
Not
cycle.
always.
I take it was something you never regretted, though.
No. I
Yeah.
didn't. If I had to do over, I'd do the same thing. I think.
Now, the X-15 seems to be a program that pretty much everybody I've talked to, it was the highlight of their career. It was such an exciting program. You guys were, in some ways, left a lot on your own to do what needed to be done. Not a lot of oversight coming down and saying you can't do this, can't do that from headquarters or whatever. Is that a fair statement to make?
I think you go one step further. I think that some of the things that I got involved in, somebody would come up and say, well, you know, it would be nice if you could do this on the airplane or on the flight, or get this into the flight program. And somebody say, well, you can't do that. And everybody look at each other, why can't you do it? And they said, well, and he said, don't give us that stuff. Let's sit down and figure out how you can do it. And there was a lot of things that were done that way. I remember one incident we wanted to do something on the airplane. I can't remember what it was, but it had to do with putting some instrumentation or something on it. And I was told it couldn't be done, and so I went down at the airplane with a clipboard, and I started looking around, and the guy, the head of the shop at the time, Harwell.
Rebel.
Rebel. He came out and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "You can't do that." He said, "What do you mean you can't do that?" I said, "What are you trying to do?" And I said, "Yeah, don't worry, don't bother me. I'm trying to figure out." I said, "You can't do it, you know." He said, I want this mounted in here so we can do it, but there isn't room, and you get nothing to fasten to." And he looked at me and said, "Give me that." That's what I wanted anyway. So he calls me down a couple of days later, and he says, "Come down, I want to show you something." Okay, I go down there. He says, "Come on out here in the hangar, I can show you something." I walk out there, and he says, "What do you think of that?" Oh, it's all. He had engineered it, he did the machine work, he did this stuff, he had his guys install it. And I said, "Wow, I didn't think you could do that." He says, "Now cover my ass and go get me the paperwork."
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
He was like,
Today.
Huh?
That won't
Oh, you
work
couldn't,
today.
He was like-
I couldn't even have gotten into the hangar today without the proper paperwork.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you, Alden. Let me finish with the introductions here. Terry?
Yeah, Terry Larson, and let's see, came to work in '53 as actually had a degree in meteorology. I was working like 2 weeks, 2 hours a week, and I heard there's openings out at NASA, or NACA.
Yeah.
So I came out there and went to work for Don Bellman, 1953. I remember the first week that I was supposed to work under Bellman was Wendy Stillwell. Remember Wendell Stillwell?
Huh?
Wendy Stillwell.
Oh, yeah, Wendy Stillwell was
Okay.
still there, yeah. He was still
So
there
he was a
until about
guy-
61 or 2.
Right.
Wrote the famous
So-
red and white book.
Yeah. Bellman said, he asked when he interviewed me, he found out I wasn't an engineer right away, so. Anyway, so he asked me a little bit about weather stuff that I was familiar with, and he mentioned that we use radiosonde balloons for airspeed measurements. Are you familiar with radio sounds? Oh, yeah, sure. Never worked with him, but I knew what he was talking about. So anyway, that's how I got assigned to airspeed measurements and working with Stillwell. First week, Stillwell was on vacation, so I read all of his reports, and by the time he got there, I knew all about airspeed calibration. So I was ready to go to work.
All right.
Anyway, I worked until '86. Worked on the X-15 program, most of the major programs. Lucky enough to stick with airspeed and did a little bit of climatological work with the X-15 and other aircraft, and wrote reports. And very happy.
Yeah. Well, your background in meteorology, you could have been on TV as a weatherman.
Well,
Instead,
yeah.
you did great research, which is good. Yes. No, we appreciate that. Yeah.
So anyway, I retired in '86 from NASA and worked for a contractor on the space shuttle program until '95, '96. So
You're doing the same thing on the shuttle program through the contract?
pretty much. You're looking at alternate systems for measuring airspeed and altitude. So I was pretty much in that one area and enjoyed it. Ended up writing about 30 reports, all on airspeed, mainly.
Okay.
I got into performance as well.
Yeah.
So that's about it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Terry. Okay. And Dan?
Do I hold my numbers up here?
Yes, there you go. We'll give you a 10.
My name's Daniel Rigger. I came to work for NACA in 1953 also. And I came in the middle of the night. The only way to get here, or to Mojave, was by bus that went to Trona. Trona was a big place there.
Oh,
And it was around 11 o'clock at night when I got to the gate to the base, and they called and got Leona, I think her name was, Leona, to come and get me. She worked for personnel. And then from then on, I thought, all I need to do is save a little money, and then I can go back home. 'Cause I didn't want to stay there. Anyway, my work with the X-15 was started in when they were working on the wing, and I mentioned this to Eldon. I ran a number of tests using weldable gauges that were new on the market at that time. And I worked with stainless steel and titanium and several other different kinds of alloys to test which would take the vibration and stuff. And Rockwell installed these, and then when they assembled started to assemble, they didn't get finished assembling the spars to the wing skins, the strain gauges came off. So then they went to using adhesive, cementing the strain gauges to the wing, and I guess it wasn't too successful, but after a while it was.
Well, they worked. We got data off of it. The problem was that we couldn't convince people that the data was any good because it wasn't what they expected. And we kept getting the data. Well, it turns out with the strain gauges, the thermal effects, you can bypass 90% of the thermal effects if you do a quick maneuver. So the temperature is essentially constant during that maneuver. The gauges will be accurate, or reasonably accurate.
Yeah, if you don't have a long enough time for a heat soak, it's not going to change it then.
Yeah, well, the thing with those gauges, the big problem with those gauges in those days, and I guess it's still a problem, is the material in the gauge itself, the metal wiring and wire and stuff, was a different thermal expansion coefficient than the material it was attached to. And not only that, but you had a temperature gradient. So what would happen is that the gauges would drift because the resistance would change with temperature. Well, then they'd also have an inherent strain because the expansion between the gauge material and the material they were attached to was different. So you get a built-in strain for that phenomenon. So,
Part of that was taken care of by bridges.
well, some of it
If
you
it
could
was-
take care of it,
yeah.
not all of it. But the problem was that all the calibrations had to be done at room temperature.
Yeah, that's true.
And so we had all of these uncertainties added to the picture. Some of them you could theoretically compensate,
Yeah.
but you didn't know whether you really had or not because you didn't know the true environment. So
So-
it was
It was a relative thing, though.
yeah.
It wasn't absolute. You couldn't get absolute.
No, but like I said, if you do quick maneuvers,
Yeah.
then from level flight, you could say that's zero. You pull a maneuver, whatever it was, and if it was for a short time period, so you didn't get any temperature changes, then what you read during that maneuver was okay. But I say because it wasn't what people expected, because they expected most of more of the wing load to be in the wings, not so much the fuselage. We had a lot of problems.
Anyway, when they
Yeah.
changed the gauges, I remember going down there and they had these huge sheets, actually wings, and heat lamps on the wing, the skin, to cure the strain gauges that were cemented at that time. That was in the early part of the manufacturing of and the installation, subsequent installation of the instrumentation. I went down there to check out the instrumentation that was being placed into the vehicle. Bob Veith, I don't know if anyone remembers him, he's still around, I think. He was with me and we tested some of the things that went into some of the instrumentation that went into the aircraft at that time. And one of the things was a 720 elements for temperature. That it was a device that we verified the continuity throughout the system. And that was just the controller of the. Actually, we couldn't get into the vehicle for the actual thermocouples, etc. And I think about a month later, not a month later, about 8 months later, I became the instrumentation engineer for the aircraft,
Were you on a specific aircraft?
the X-15.
Oh, I mean, but you weren't on 1, 2, 3. You were on the program. The
Yeah, I
X-15
was on the program. And subsequent to that, I think it was a month later, I took a position over there at Space Task Group. And that's where I stayed. And when they moved down to Texas, I went with them and worked on the Apollo program, Gemini and Mercury, and Shuttle for a while before I retired.
You moved down with Walt Williams when he
Walt
went.
Williams and Marty Burns and who? Lincoln, yeah.
Oh, Kenny. Yeah.
Kenny Lang, yeah. Kenny was there and had a very interesting time. I actually wrote the original R&D for the instrumentation and radar and telemetry with the support of the people that were specialists in that area. And that became a working paper that was issued and distributed to centers. And that's it.
So you went down to Houston. What brought you back to this area? What brought you back to Edwards?
Well, my wife's mother lived in Lancaster. So,
That's the most
and she
important
was,
thing.
There you go.
she was in her 80s at the time.
Oh, hi, Lori.
He told me we'd come back. He said, I promised you we'd come back.
I
I
did.
didn't know it would be 20 years later.
This is after you retired down in
Yeah,
Houston?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, it was really after a flood occurred there. We had 24 inches of rain in 26 hours. And we were walking down the street with water up to our thighs. And that was about 2 weeks before we left there, somewhere around that time.
It sounds like my wife, she used to live up in Portland, and she was there in May of 1980 when Mount St. Helens blew its top.
Very nice.
And she could literally see Mount St. Helens from, the balcony of the apartment she was living in. It's like, I think I'm going to move now. So she picked up, came down to California, which I'm glad she did, or we never would have met. So it worked out really well. And it was funny because I was actually up in Washington at the same time myself, because I was still in the Air Force at the time. So we both came from Northwest to come down here. But
we really enjoyed the being out there, and to some
Yeah.
extent she did especially.
Lots of men.
When they had a successful mission, boy, hell broke loose in that area. Webster, Texas, and
Splashdown party.
yeah,
Oh,
splashdown
yeah.
That's
parties.
another story.
We took over one of the hotels there. There were about 300 people there.
Oh, wow.
That was really enjoyable.
All right. Did you follow the X-15 program while you were down there? Did you keep pretty close tabs on what was happening?
I think I communicated with Terry a number of times, but
Yeah.
not to any large extent.
Yeah. Just what was in the paper and things
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I went to Langley, Base Staff Group, in 1961. So I think the X-15 was only in operation for about 3 years.
Yeah.
3 years, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So now, a personal question here: which do you prefer, Houston or Lancaster?
I
Takes the
think-
fifth.
I think-
Yeah, I figured it.
I really think this is much better here. We had temperatures of 99 degrees and humidity at
99%.
99%.
Or more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not
26 inches of
kidding.
rain and 20 more, or-
It was terrible. It was terrible at times.
Yeah.
Not all the time,
Yeah.
but at times it was.
Yeah.
But one thing that was really nice there was the green grass was growing, even in the winter. You had green grass growing, not like here.
Oh, yeah.
What's green grass?
Yeah. They just paint the rocks green. Yeah. Actually, I have a question going back. You guys worked at NACA, and this is something I've never been able to, since you guys worked there, you can answer this for me, hopefully, once and for all. Everybody calls NASA, NASA, obviously, and they don't say NACA, like they did. I see a lot of people say NACA. Did you call it NACA, or did you say NACA?
Well, we call it NACA
We
at
call
times,
it-
but usually it was NACA.
Ah, okay.
When I was at Langley in those days, I think the people that work there call it NACA, but the local
Yeah.
people call us NACA nuts.
Well, that answers that one.
I think most of the time it's NACA.
Yeah.
Contrasted to NASA, I mean,
Yeah, yeah, nobody calls
Everybody
NASA
says
NASA, yeah.
really don't,
Yeah, yeah,
so.
okay. No, I was curious about that, yeah.
I had most of my experience has been with the Apollo program.
Okay. Yeah, so you were there throughout the whole moon landing
Yes,
and
I
all
was.
that? Yeah.
I had several subsystems.
Mhm.
The Apollo, they called a system. You had a program manager of that system, and then you had subsystem managers under that took care of different disciplines, like the power, the instrumentation, the propulsion systems, and one of the really sophisticated systems was a system for determining where the vehicle was in space. And I forget the name of that system, but, pardon? Yeah, it took directions from the stars.
Okay, yeah, the Star Tracker and
Star Trek
things like that,
system,
yeah. Okay.
Something of that nature.
Yeah, celestial navigation, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a long time.
Yeah. When did you retire from NASA, from Houston?
1979.
Oh, okay, and then you've been back here since then?
Yes, essentially.
Okay, all right, well, let's move on down here. And Merle, thank you for waiting your turn there. Okay.
I'm Merle DeGear, and I came to NASA mid-1961, straight from school, and with the hopes of seeing the X-15 someday. And I walked into personnel, did about an hour's worth of stuff. Barry Rao picked me up and said, "Would you like to go out to the hangar?" And we walked out to the hangar, and there they were. And later that day, I was working on them.
All right.
Actually, I was reading the maintenance manual, which I did until John McTeague came back. And then I was working on them.
Yeah.
He proceeded to take me down to the hangar and introduced me to his crew chief and said, "Here he is. If you got any kind of nuisance stuff you need to have cleaned up, give it to him." And I did a lot of little sketches and wrote work orders and things for John's approval, and became a subsystems engineer airplane. And I was there for about a year. Then we had some other small programs that were going. We had the F-104 chase planes and things, and I kind of was herded off to go take care of all that while the X-15 program went on. And I was doing that, and then eventually, fairly late in the X-15 program, we had the lifting buddy program going in parallel with it, and I was on that. And when we lost the one lifting body, a couple weeks later, well, I got assigned to X-15 number 1 as an ops engineer, and I had 3 flights and 3 aborts, and so that was my time on the program. And then the headquarters decided to rebuild the lifting bodies, the one that had crashed, and I chose to go back to that. And so I left the program and stayed very much in touch with it. Whenever I was in the building or something and there was going to be a flight, I would angle a ride out on the lake bed or whatever I could. And I remember hearing the news. I was down at Northrop on the lifting body, and when Pete Knight flew his flight with the tanks, and he got a speed record and he burned the hole through the bottom of the airplane, and I heard about that on the telephone, straight from Edwards. I called in about something, and before I could ask the question, and they were telling me the story. So
Hot off the press.
it was an exciting time. I got there on a Monday. On Tuesday, we set an altitude record, and we went to a flight party that night, and that was my going thing for the next quite a few years. I mean, I think Bill was the one that complained about being in a 7-man carpool and having to drive by himself every day.
You done with Merle?
Yeah.
Oh, well, actually, just real quick, just now. So when did you leave NASA? How long did you stay with NASA?
I was there until '94, and I retired.
You worked on things like shuttle programming?
I worked, yeah, when the ALT program happened, I left ops and went off on the shuttle task force there for a year, working with the people that came in from Kennedy. And then I got over into project management a little bit, kind of from an ops point of view. And eventually, the safety office opened up, and John Menke asked for somebody out of ops to apply. And I thought, well, that's a chance to get a grade, and there was some people I didn't really want in there, so I took the job. And then there was a lot of people who didn't want me in there. But other than that, I mean, I stayed in that until I retired.
Okay, very cool. Okay, thank you. Bill, you had something you wanted to say?
Well, there were a couple of things left unsaid about Don Cordes. Don taught the X-15 pilots class that I was in. That was me and Pete Knight. Don taught the majority of the ground school, and he really knows his structures. We learned about Inconel and 20 other different metals, and there wasn't any doubt that Don understood that airplane. He did say one thing that I think needs clarifying. He said that we had some windshields cracked, and that is correct, but the audience ought to understand that it was only the outer pane of 3 panes that cracked, so we weren't near to exposing the pilot to the free stream, even though we did have 2 different occasions of windshield grazing.
Yeah, they didn't come out or anything. They just grazed. And, well, the early ones cracked. We had some that had just long cracks in it. Then we had some that, just the outer one grazed, like a car windshield. And finally, Rockwell figured out what you had to do. They changed the shape of the windshield, went from an airplane shape to an oval, elliptic glass. That cut down on the thermal stresses and took the pressure points off of the glass so that thermal expansion wouldn't put point loads on it.
Now, they only actually did that on ship 2. Was there talk about going back and retrofitting 1 and 3 with the elliptical glass?
I think I thought didn't they change all the windshields? I thought they did.
I was just 2 was the only one that got the elliptical.
Yeah.
So they're the only one that got
He was gonna go on
Yeah,
a
well,
higher.
it didn't have any grazing. It had the deposit of burned ablative
Yeah.
on the,
Yeah.
So to put-
the exposed
Yeah.
windshield.
Yeah, had to put the eyelid on there to keep that, so
Yeah,
they'd be
the
able to see.
eyelid was on the windshield you were going to use for landing, and it never was open till Mach 2 on the way back down.
Yeah.
And so you always had the left window for landing, and the right window you took your chances. I'm sure Don's wondering how I'm an authority on this since I never flew ship 2.
Well, you flew with one eye closed, didn't you?
Actually, that's something I want to make sure on too. Now, your name is Eldon, but you prefer to be called Don?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay.
Further praise for this guy, really a good math teacher.
Oh, yeah?
He taught advanced math, at least for me it was advanced, at junior college in Lancaster. When was that, back in the 60s?
Yeah.
So you were a teacher at the same time you were working on the X-15?
Oh, my background, I couldn't get a job when I got out of college, so I went back to grad school at a little place in Indiana called Purdue. And while I was there, I got interested in what NACA was doing, and I taught for 2 years at Purdue before I went to work for NACA. I went to work for NACA in '49, and then I got talked into coming out here in 1960. And but in the meantime, I taught night school for University of Virginia, graduate program, while I was at Lyman. When I came out here, the guys talked me into teaching some more classes. Classes in math, and I gave some informal classes on flutter analysis, and airplane dynamics, primarily structural dynamics. And I got decided it was time to retire in 1960, so and all the other things.
Oh, okay.
Been a while? That's been a while?
Well, see, my big ambition before I came out here was to get my PhD and then take NASA, MAC in those days, and then go back to university, because I always liked to go to university. And that's why I taught night school, because I could keep my hand in. Well, it just kept getting further and further. Well, anyway, after 1960, when I did retire, West Coast University was starting a satellite campus in Lancaster. So I taught math and physics and stuff for them for several years, and then they pulled in their programs and reconsolidated, and so I had to look for something else to do.
You said you retired from NASA in 1960.
Yeah.
But I didn't even go to X-15 ground school until
I mean,
1960.
I retired in 1980. I went to Dryden in 1960.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd retired in 1980, so.
Okay. Yeah.
That's like the carrier ship landing before the rocket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it there when you first doing the, actually had one, I just looked around looking here. I think it was, I think the first flight I observed was the one that they lost the seal on the windshield, on the canopy. It burned, something blew out or something, I can't remember what it was. I remember what flight that was, but that was, and I just happened to see the note in here.
Did you, have you ever talked to Christensen?
No.
He was the one that was responsible for the gyro system in the X-15.
Oh, okay.
And it's very complicated, 6 gimbal, I believe.
Yeah.
And he went up to Ames
Mhm.
after he left here.
Oh, so he's
I
probably.
ran into him in headquarters.
He's in headquarters.
Yeah, after he went to Ames, I don't know where he is now, but after he was at Ames, I saw him at headquarters one time. And that may have been a temporary assignment. He may have
Yeah,
gone
like,
back to Ames.
Yeah.
Kelly and Cavaliers, yeah.
Like his temporary assignment for 2 years. Yeah.
That's an internship for a year.
That's
Ah.
August.
At,
I came here in July of
have that.
'60. And then this
With
first
NASA
flight that
as
flew
well as-
after I came here was when they had
as well as
burned
the
out canopy
politicians.
seals.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I want to go back to you here, Don. If you can tell me a little bit more about the instrumentation side of things. That was your specialty. They've only talked to one other guy that did instrumentation specifically. Tell me more about what you did.
It really wasn't instrumentation per se, it was developing instrumentation.
Okay.
For the thing, actually, most of my work was the X-1E, something you probably don't remember, it was called Dinosaur Program.
Oh, yeah.
You
X-20.
do remember that one,
Oh,
huh?
yes.
And I worked quite heavily on that. I was instrumentation chairman of the Air Force, NASA, and Boeing
Mhm.
Dinosaur Committee.
Yeah.
And so mainly my work on the X-15 was, if I had a piece of instrumentation, somebody went into it.
Mhm.
But I didn't work as an instrument engineer or anything on the X-15, so.
Okay.
But I always admired the X-15 program and
Yeah.
watched as much as I could. I was more tied in with X-1E and the pedestal plane out in front of the building.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And the dinosaur and the
Yeah.
shuttles and things.
Yeah.
So it was a fun time, but as I say, it's actual hands-on experience, X-15. I probably have least of all the people here have experience.
And when you're talking about instrumentation, some people will think of, like the instruments in the cockpit, your altitude,
Oh,
speed.
I mean,
But you're talking about like the instrumentation as far as getting test data.
Altitude and
Right.
inertial guidance and all the various speeds and the ball nose.
Mhm. Okay.
Actually, I was going to land the shuttle when I was on the committee that went to Marshall, and they were going to land the shuttle on the inertial guidance. I said, "You want to land 500 feet above ground or below ground?" Anyway, they went to the ball nose.
That was a ball node system from the X-15 pretty much transferred over to the X-20?
Yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work we did ended up on shuttle and such,
Mhm.
but as I say, everybody had a lot of faith in the inertial guidance system and things, and you had to know the limitations of every system.
Yeah. Did you work with the accelerometers and things like that?
Oh, yes, accelerometers, everything,
Attitude
pressure
sensors.
transducers, attitude sensors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was curious. I worked for Endevco for 11
yes.
years,
Oh.
so yeah, I know a lot about accelerators, strain gauges, things like that.
Oh,
So,
yeah. That was my-
You know a guy
What's
named
it?
Brooks.
That doesn't sound familiar. Yeah.
He worked for Endevco.
Was that back in the 60s?
It was back in the 60s.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was there. I started there in '81. Yeah. Right after I got out of the Air Force. So I went for a long time. Ran the test lab there.
I really had very little hands-on experience on the X-15. It was checking the type transducers
Uh-huh.
they used. If they needed special capabilities, I was able to provide them and such.
Yeah, you spent a lot of time
Tape recorders and such even, so it was anything. It was data acquisition clear down to pilot's voice message.
So you handle the tape recorders then also?
I'd got some improvements in the tape recorder and such.
Oh, okay. Well, I get another personal question. My dad worked on instrumentation tape recorders for Sangamo Electric. I don't know if you ever heard of this. Okay, yeah, I was just curious. So you're probably using the stuff my dad. That's where I got my first interest in the X-15 actually, because his territory included Edwards. He would come up here and do a lot of work on the X-15 as far as bringing in the tape recorders, the instrumentation stuff.
Thank you.
Sangamo Electric, and he'd let me tag along with him and stuff. So I used to come out here and get to go out in the hangars and play around the X-15, so to speak. And he'd pawn me off on one of the guys. I have no idea who it was. Might be one of the guys I've even talked to. Who knows? But he'd go off and do his work, and he'd say, "Here, take my son away and show him a good time, basically." And so I go around and check out the simulators and go out on the flight line. I remember watching him mate the X-15 one time for a flight. I met Neil Armstrong. He just came out of the simulator one time when I was there when I was a young kid. I was only like 6, 7 years old at the time. So I was. So that's where my love of the X-15 came from.
Well, Dan here worked on the tape recorders too quite a bit, didn't you?
Yeah,
So,
we-
shuttle.
Well, not on the shuttle,
Yeah, the shuttle.
and on Apollo.
Mm.
Uh,
Okay.
We had a company down there in Anaheim, Odetics.
Oh yes. Yeah.
And our system was, our specifications were very unique because we had areas, critical operations that we wanted to monitor continually. So we had a recorder fitted so that it would cycle 3 channels for those critical measurements and also transmit that information. And the remainder of the 24-channel tape recorder was for those slow changing, non-critical measurements, which at that time was unique, and that was in 1969, 1968, something like that. As far as I know, it never completed everything to our specifications, but they used it anyway. That was an interesting time.
Yeah, that whole time was very interesting, putting all this stuff together. I mean, we went to the moon in 8 years. That was pretty darn amazing.
What I really enjoyed was working with, and I was many of them, of course. I worked with Dr. Shea, and Shea apparently took the blame for the explosion that occurred during the test program with White and who were the other two?
Grissom, White, and
Yeah.
Chaffee. Yeah.
Yeah.
Apollo 1.
We had a medical recorder under the seat of one of the pilots when that occurred, and it was just one word or one statement that came out when the explosion, and it was like, "What?"
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah, it was a very bad time.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, and everybody went back and did all the recriminations and stuff afterward, and yet they were basically
Well-
doing very similar in Mercury and Gemini. They just got lucky, and nothing
Shea
like that
took
happened.
the blame.
Yeah.
And since that time, he was offered the job of managing the shuttle program,
Mhm.
but he wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
He didn't want to be in a position of threat, possibly causing somebody else's death.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked to Harrison Storms and stuff, who, of course, one of the principals on Apollo, and yeah, that was a very tough time for everybody concerned. Yeah. 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 Well, back on the X-15, just go around the room and talk about it a little bit. What would you classify as being like one or two really standout moments? What's the biggest thing that stands out in your mind on the X-15 program? Something that happened, something you saw, somebody you talked to, anything like that? Anybody want to try that?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Have you talked to the program manager at who was a program manager at the company, North American at the time?
Well, I talked to Harrison Storms before he went to Apollo. Of course, he was the chief designer on the X-15 and worked directly with Scotty.
No, I'm talking about the operations of the company, not Storm.
Are you talking about the guy who was president of the company? I think it was Atwood.
Phelps and
Phelps.
Charlie Phelps.
No, I haven't talked to Charlie
Somebody
Phelps.
like-
He's somebody I'd still like to find.
I don't know if he's still alive.
Yeah, I don't have any contact.
Charlie passed.
Oh, he did
passed
pass
away.
I
away?
believe that's correct.
He
Yeah.
was really a great guy.
Yeah.
I remember one time I told you about this, I think. We were working on the airplane late at night with the instrumentation, checking it out at the plant down there, Downey. And it had been raining outside. It was really wet. We would normally work our shift after the technicians got done during the day, and we'd come in late in the day. And then we worked until maybe 12 o'clock at night. And we were working at 12, around 12 o'clock. And this guy shows up with an umbrella, and I was wondering what the hell was he doing there, you know? And I looked at him. He had an umbrella in his hand, wet, dripping from him. I said, "How you guys doing?" He said, "We're doing fine." And I looked at Bob Meath. I said, "Isn't that Charlie Phelps?" He said, "Yeah, I think so." And it was. Pretty nice guy.
Yeah.
Easy to talk to.
Hmm.
He'd go around and talk to anybody,
Yeah.
technician, janitor, with the same kind of geniality, which is unusual, I think, for a man at that time. They wanted to give him the job for the shuttle program too, but he turned it down.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I wish I'd had a chance to talk with him. I know Harrison talked about him very highly, and I've heard other people talk him, but I never had the chance to speak with him personally.
There were a couple others that were key people in construction and negotiations with NASA
Mhm.
from that company, North American.
Yeah, I've talked to a few people from North American, but it's been harder to find a lot of the people from North American than it has been obviously from NASA and stuff. It's an easier organization to get into than NASA than it is at North American. One of the things that happened early in my research was that I went to the North American division at LAX, where the X-15 originally was built. I think the building had already been taken down at that point, but it's where they built the B-1 and things like that. And they had their photo archives there, so I was going through the North American photo archives, and they had literally like this whole wall of shelves with with drawers in them with photos and stuff, like the 4x5 negatives and in there. And I had a chance to go through there, and I chose a bunch of photos and had a lot of things done up. I found out that like a year later, that entire photo archive was destroyed. This is for all the North American program, not just X-15, because and it was done purposely. They did it because, well, we don't have the room for it anymore. We don't have a place for it. And so many things like that have been lost, and it's horrible.
Did you talk to Warren Pope?
No, I haven't heard that name.
Yeah, he was in radar and communications.
Okay. Or did he work a lot with like the high range and things? And
No, that was Randy Franklin at NASA, who was responsible for a lot of that work done. Although he didn't get credit for it,
yeah.
but he did do the work. He's now in a wheelchair back in Houston.
Yeah. Merle, you want to give me your impressions on the X-15?
It was an incredible airplane, really. I mean, when you consider what it was trying to do with what people knew at the time or didn't know, Don alluded to that. A lot of the data people had trouble believing, but they thought there were bad problems with it because it wasn't what they expected. I was designing and having built boundary layer rakes for Ed Saltzman.
Oh, yeah.
And we were hanging them underneath the airplane and one up on the nose, and about 4 inches long, and we made them heavy because they were going to get a lot of heat and for a short time. And if we could get them through that much time, well, then they'd come back. And we were flying those. We'd been out to Mach 6 with them, and I got a phone call from North American one day, and they said, "Could we have a meeting with you and talk about how you design rigs? We've been trying to design for one of the things we're putting on the airplane, and we can't get it through the design people." And they were using columbium and all kinds of exotic materials, and they still couldn't get it through. They came up They took my sketches and they left and they went back and they said, we're gonna build one like that. We don't know why it works, but we're gonna build it. And afterwards, I got thinking about it, you know, and we did a lot of that without real, I mean, you know, Don could have probably have done some big calculations for it, but I'm not sure that he would have approved it if he had early
Well,
on.
you know, there was a lot of things on the X-15 that were done that way, you know, I mean, it was, you know, it was an experimental airplane, and a lot of things were done that you couldn't get done today.
Yeah.
You couldn't get them, you couldn't get them through the system. And a few things got bit on a few
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
but for the most part, it was, you know, we were doing things where nobody had ever been before.
Yeah.
And, you know, you just do the best you can and.
It was exciting times.
Oh, yeah.
And learn from it and go on from there. I know one, Terry probably remembers when the ball nose on the X-15, when they went to go to Mach 6, it wouldn't go there. And it just happened that the Lewis lab back in Cleveland, which is the engine lab, they had a metallurgist back there that was working on very high temperature materials for turbine blades and things like that. And so I went back there and talked to him for one time and told him what the problem was. And he said, well, he didn't know why he couldn't make a ball out of that material. It was not really, it wasn't machinable, it wasn't castable, but he thought he could make one if we could figure out some way to drill the holes and stuff like that and shape it, you know, do the final finish on it. So he sent out a piece of material for Rebel to see if he could do anything with in the machine shop. And they tried all kinds of things. They tried grinding and drilling, and of course nothing would touch it. They found that you could do under certain conditions. I don't remember exactly how they did it, but e-locks would work, and so would some form of grinding, very slow. But while they were doing this, I remember I happened to be down in the shop one day when this salesman came in selling machine tool bits and cutters and cut material like that, and he was bugging Rebel, and Rebel had about enough of it, and so he told the guy was trying to sell him these new drill bits, and drill anything, and so Rebel says, I'll buy a complete setup if you drill a hole in this, and it costs him a piece of this material. And the guy put it in the drill press, and he got it all set up, and he brings it down like this, and there's a loud screaming noise, and smoke started coming out, and he raised it up, and the bit was perfectly flat on the end. There wasn't even a shiny piece on the material. And the guy looks at the bit, looks at the material, he says, there is no such thing.
You found something from an alien spacecraft or something.
But I don't know what the stuff was. I remember we never did find out, but Rebel figured out how to clean up the ball and how to get the holes in it, and it flew on
Oh, yeah. Got a lot of good data.
yeah. But there was a lot of things like that happen. That you just jump in and do it, and I know the pilots did the same kind of thing. They were going places where nobody'd been before.
Terry, what's your favorite story in the X-15?
Oh, gosh. Well, personally, I got a lift or a rise out of the upper atmospheric data we got out of it. You know, like the ball nose, using the total pressures we measured off of it, we could, plus temperature measurements and so forth, we could calculate density, atmospheric density. Well, this was something that wasn't done. I mean, you know, not at 300,000 feet.
Yeah.
They had a few Arcus rockets, radio, rocket-sons out at PMR that did the same sort of thing, but they were pretty limited.
Yep.
And even before that, we I don't know whose decision this was, but probably as part of the high range project when it was first developed, they wanted to know just what the atmosphere was along that corridor. What at 200, 300, 400,000 feet. And so I looked at radiosonde data. People in those days looked at radiosonde data up to about 100 millibar level, 50,000 feet. And that was it, because that's all you need to analyze the weather patterns. So we looked at it at 120,000 feet with the balloon finally quit. But the measurements were still pretty good. So I'd sit and all by hand, I'd write down temperatures and pressures and stuff, different months of the year, different places along the, I think we looked at 3 radiosonde locations, Edwards and Las Vegas, and, Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, Tonopah? Maybe Tonopah. Anyway, we came up with just a boring report of, to the average person, temperatures and pressures and so forth, and compared those against the standard atmosphere, which is pretty big differences at times in some, times of the year. And so this, I don't know exactly how all this data was ever used, if it was ever useful, but I got a kick out of it. And we also got the winds. And later on, I read a report that they found out from a reference that I wrote that they had monsoonal winds at these higher altitudes, and they didn't even know that. So that was something I remember.
Very cool.
LR11.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to Jack McKay one time, about the time they took the 99s off of when they finished that program, put the big engine in there. Yeah. And Jack's comment was, he said, there's more manned flight time on that engine than any other engine, and it's never been man-rated. They never went through all the engineering and testing and all that stuff that they had to do on the 99. They did on, but then they went back and used them on the lifting bodies, and they still weren't man-rated.
Everybody told us how good they were until we went out and we had trouble getting all four chambers lit. And then they started remembering that, oh yeah, we used to have problems with that.
Have to relearn the old lessons.
Yeah, that
Was the data you were getting unexpected when you were getting all this data at the different altitudes based on the models that you thought would be there?
It wasn't really that. No, it wasn't too. It was reasonable.
Well,
I didn't really know. Well, the monsoonal effect.
At that altitude,
Yeah, that. I hadn't even thought of that. I mean,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was significant. The winds, easterly winds in the summer and westerly winds in the winter at these altitudes.
Yeah.
So the X-15 program contributed to that kind of information, which is very significant.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I was glad to be part of it.
Thank you. Okay. Bill, what's your favorite story? Besides knocking your knee pad loose, what's your favorite story?
Well, power off landings in high performance airplanes were quite a big deal when I got in the X-15. The X-15 was not a very good glider. It fell about 1 foot for every 4 it went forward. And so I spent my whole training period flying practice approaches in the F-104. We'd taken F-104 up to 30 or 35,000 feet, put the takeoff flaps down and the speed brakes out, about 75 or 80% on the throttle, depending on your fuel weight, and shoot a practice approach down to touchdown if you wanted to on the lake bed. And so I shot 1 million of those, and I thought, well, I'm all ready for my first flight. My first flight was to Mach 4 at 80,000 feet, and I was afraid I wasn't going to get the engine lit until I did get it lit. Then I was afraid I would get it lit. Things happened so fast that I went from Mach 1 to Mach 4 in record time. I finally got to shut the engine down, and then the airplane smoothed out and was just a glider like a 104. And the bottom line was the landing was one of the easier parts of the profile. You get off, you let the airplane get a long way ahead of you when you're boosting out to Mach 4.
Yeah. How was the view up there?
Well, the view was excellent, unparalleled. I flew a flight to 300 and some odd thousand feet, 306 or 7,000 feet. And I looked out the right window, and there was San Luis Obispo, and I looked out the front of the airplane, and I could see the Gulf of California. And those two are a long way apart.
Do you think you were going to make it back to Edwards?
Well, even though it didn't glide very well, it glided far enough to make Edwards.
Was it Bruce that flew over past Pasadena? Was it?
That was Neil.
That was Neil. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Neil.
Yeah, they talked about landing in at LAX, yeah.
You were the one that flew the flight, they were gonna fire a missile off the coast over there.
Oh, yeah.
And you were gonna capture it with the stuff in the back, the doors didn't open, or you saw the missile, but.
Yeah, I saw the missile, but nobody else did. Yeah, that turned out to be last flight. We didn't know it was gonna be last flight. The program ended on kind of an ignominious note.
Yeah.
I'd have liked to have seen a more Christian burial for the X-15, but Mr. Bickle was calling the shots, and he said we'd fly for calendar 1968, and we did. But the last flyable day we had when we had an in-commission airplane was October 24th, so that was the last flight we got.
Yeah, I remember that last flight they tried to get off with Pete in December when you got your snowstorm out
Yeah.
there. Yeah, I remember.
Pete really struggled getting Flight 200. Never made it.
Yeah. Well, it's good. You got the last one, whether you wanted it or not. You got the last one.
It's about all the glory I got out of the program, so I'll take it.
Were you out there at the time they were trying to launch number 200 during the
I
snowstorm?
was mission controller.
Ah, okay.
Pete and I generally switched off. I always was his mission controller, and he was mine when he wasn't traveling or doing something classified. But Pete and I kind of alternated flights and alternated mission control.
How was it when that first time you dropped off the shackles? I've heard Milt talk about that one, that nobody prepared him for that.
Well, I didn't get much help from Joe Walker and Jack McKay either. Something I never understood was it didn't feel like you fell off the shackles. It felt like a gun had fired you straight down. And there was just an almost irresistible impulse to put back stick in to keep the airplane from losing altitude. Well, you weren't going to keep the airplane from losing altitude until you got that engine lit. And so that's when I was having these conversations with myself about let's get it lit. And then, do I really want it lit? How do I shut it off?
What was the protocol for that? Obviously, you don't want to fire the engine immediately on drop because you might run into the B-52.
They let us move the throttle forward out of shutoff as soon as we were clear of the B-52, but it took long enough for all the propellants and igniters to get where they ought to be that there was safety clearance from the B-52 by the time the engine lit.
Yeah. Did you go out a certain ways before you pull the nose up to make sure you?
No,
Yeah.
you were on your own.
You're going, yeah, yeah.
But there
Right.
was still no danger. You still went
Yeah.
anywhere near the B-52 when you went through his altitude.
Yeah.
You dropped a long way down before you
Right.
climbed out.
Yeah. Speaking of when you were in the cockpit and actually flying along, like when you looked out over the nose of the aircraft, just to get an idea of if you're sitting in the cockpit, what could you see out in front of you? Could you see the actual nose, or did it drop away from your view or something, or is it just the windows? I was just wondering how much you could actually see of the aircraft in front
I
of you.
don't remember being able to see the nose, but I don't remember not being able to see it either.
Okay. Yeah.
The view out of the X-15 wasn't as bad as it looked. They were small windows, but your head was right up against them. And the only place that the vision was really inadequate was aft on the left side. We always flew a left-hand traffic pattern. I've never heard of an X-15 pilot flying a right-hand traffic
Yeah.
pattern. But you only had about 100 degrees field of view to one side. And that wasn't enough to see your runway.
Mm.
So you had to have a landmark out on the desert there to turn base leg on, and until you could turn enough to get the runway in sight again. But that, we practiced at all the lake beds, and I pretty much had landmarks at all of them.
Okay. What was the most exciting flight that you had? Was that your altitude flight?
Yeah, it had to be.
Yeah.
That was a funny flight. I got high on altitude, which was just due to not flying the airplane. And then I was supposed to go to burnout, according to the simulator. And I went way past my burnout time, so finally I reached up and shut the engine down. And I coasted over 300,000 feet that flight. But the interesting thing was that as I pulled the throttle back, my elbow hit the quick release on my pre-launch checklist. And there were 25 pages of checklist floating around the zero-G conditions in G back on the airplane, which was 3 minutes later.
Oof.
So I got a good chance to repent my sins that day.
You've seen that film, haven't you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Were you able to get all the pieces back together before you got G? Or,
You're on your memory for that.
That's what they paid Merle to do.
okay.
You have all that film.
So it must have been interesting then to come through a landing with no checklist then.
Well, it was a pre-launch checklist. There was a checklist
okay.
that you could have thrown out the window at launch. You were all done with it.
Oh, okay.
So there wasn't anything I needed on that checklist.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Luckily, nothing jammed anywhere or something too when you're trying to use the throttle or something. None of the pages got stuck anywhere.
Well, the binder was perverse. You could never unlock it when you wanted it unlocked. I knocked it loose accidentally.
Did you keep any mementos from the X-15 program, like your checklist?
No, I didn't keep that kind of mementos. When Ralph Jackson retired, he gave me a model of X-15 number 2, a wind tunnel model made out of steel, stainless steel, I guess. And so I kept it for a while, and then my conscience got to hurting me because it wasn't Ralph's
Yeah.
model to give away. So I gave it back to Public Affairs, and Cam Martin found out about it when I retired and told Ken Soleil that I had my eye on that model. And Ken gave it to me, and then I took it home a second time. Ken had no more authority to give it away than Ralph did, but I have custody of the model, so I guess that's
you still have it?
95% of the law.
I know there's one of the wind tunnel models is out. In fact, actually two. I think there's an X-15 and the X-15 Delta Wing wind tunnel are out at the museum. I'm pretty sure. So
What museum is that?
the Edwards Museum.
Oh,
Yeah.
I haven't seen either one of those, I don't think.
Yeah. They used to. I don't know if they're still out there for a while. It's been a couple of years since I've been there. But I know they had them in a case out there. And a friend of mine actually borrowed them for a while to do some model work off of them. He was taking some molds off of them. And I think the last time I actually saw them was during the Edwards Air Show, when they had all the X-15 pilots, they had a big deal for an anniversary or something there for the X-15 a few years ago, and they actually had them on display out there. But yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know there was one still out there. And so, how big is that model that you have?
Edwards?
No, the wind tunnel you've got. Yeah.
It's about a foot long, maybe 13 inches.
Oh, okay.
That's a nice model. It's
Oh, yeah.
just really first class.
Ah.
And my conscience almost hurts me enough to make me give it back a second time.
Is that the model that they made, the ones that they sold at the gift shop?
No, this was an interesting model. The X-15 had 50% of its rudder was above the center line and 50% was below. And the airplane had real handling qualities above Mach 5, at above 5 alpha or 5 degrees angle of attack or something like that. And they found, Dick Day and Joe Walker found through simulation that they could get along without the lower rudder. And so we never flew it again except on a couple of, on one flight with the drop tanks. But I lost my chain of thought here. We had an X-15. Oh, in the wind tunnel, they looked at using the same amount of rudder that they had with the lower rudder and the upper rudder, but putting 60% of the area in the upper rudder and 40% in the lower, and they thought that might give them better handling qualities. And that's the model I have, is with the 60-40 tail and
Oh, that's
the
an
extra length that Ship 2 had in it.
Huh?
And it's just a very tidy model. I just took fancy to it, even though I never flew it.
Yeah, it's interesting. The one ship you didn't fly, that's the one you've got. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I like that question. Did anybody else keep anything from the X-15 program? Anything you have in your personal collection at home?
Yeah.
What do you have?
I have a F4 panel, about yay big. Fit in between the ballistic control rockets on the nose. And this one's got a boundary layer rake on it. And
Is that like that strake thing that comes up?
yeah, it's like a 4-inch slab of Inconel that
Yeah.
got 4 tubes sticking
Yeah.
out of the front of it, an inch apart. And it was going to go in the junk heap. And Ron Waite grabbed it, walked into the office and tossed it on my desk and said, "Here, if you don't take it home, it's going to go in the junk." So I took it home. It's sitting on my shelf in my room there.
Heck of a paperweight.
Yeah, it's. I've already told Betty that I was going to take it back out. I just haven't been back. When I was out there for Bill's astronaut wing thing, I talked to her because I had 2 or 3 things that I thought, they're not all X-15, but they're pieces of things that. Well, I have another piece of the leading edge of Ship 3's vertical tail. The needle.
Is that knife
The
edge?
nice
Yeah.
knife edge.
Oh, okay.
Herb Anderson designed that, and I worked with him quite a bit. You know, we were trying to get all the details worked out on how we could make as many of the parts of the original still be there. You know, I mean, the functions, because it was all a bunch of sliding pieces that could grow and fill up the gaps as it got hot and that type of thing, depending on which piece got hotter faster than the other. And so when he designed it from a round one to a thin edge, that was quite an accomplishment on his part. After the accident, well, as they were cleaning it up, he brought one of them in and said, "Here, I'll give you one of them. He's got one, I've got one."
Oh, you're talking about the number 3 accident?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
That's actually a question I had too, is does anybody ever know what happened to the wreckage after the accident investigation was over with? Did they just destroy it? Did it get put somewhere?
The accident,
The number 3 accident? Mike
number
Adams?
2.
number 3.
No, number 3 airplane, yeah, Mike
I
Adams.
don't know what happened. I have the official accident report, but I don't have any of this.
John McTeague would know. John was the ops engineer on that airplane. Well, no, he wasn't at that time. Vince was. Vince Cabas.
Okay. Yeah, I've talked to Vince, yeah.
And I'm guessing that whatever was left got buried,
Yeah.
but I don't know where.
That's
I
what
don't,
the,
I don't either. I've got the accident report, but I don't have any of the substantiating data.
mhm.
I know that at various places on the base, there are remains of airplanes that have been buried,
Yeah,
but I don't know where they are.
yeah. Yeah, things like the B-70 and things like that, obviously, a
Well-
lot of wreckage, you know, to dispose of in
So a
some
lot
way.
of them were off the base somewhere,
Hmm.
you know, and some of them got drug in, and some of them probably got,
Yeah.
a lot of it got buried right where it was at.
Yeah. Well, I know I've seen shots of the X-15, the number 3, they brought it back and
Yeah.
put it in the
Yeah.
hangar for the investigation, but I never saw anything after that to know where it went.
Yeah.
I know there's still people that say they find pieces every now and then out there in the area.
There are
Yeah.
people that hunt them for a hobby.
Yeah.
Go out to accident sites and see how much
Yeah.
debris they can find.
Yeah.
Yeah, with metal detectors and stuff like that, you can,
One of the best stories on airplanes that buried themselves was an F-104 that Joe Walker was taking on cross country. And, we didn't have any trouble with the nose gears wearing out, but occasionally we wore out a main tire on a cross country, a long flight, long number of flights. So Joe told the crew to put an extra wheel and tire in the gun bay, or the ammo bay, I guess it was. And then we needed a weather flight for the X-15 the next morning, so Milt Thompson took this same airplane out to do a weather flight. And when he came back in the pattern, he got a split flap, and the airplane went into a roll. So Milt bailed out, and the F-104 became a lawn dart. And so the accident investigation team went out to the accident site and started digging in the wreckage, and they found 3 wheels and 3 tires. That really baffled them.
Gee.
Secret program.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit about the X-20, obviously the follow-on to the X-15. A lot of people from the X-15 worked on X-20 also. Neil was on the program and stuff. Tell me a little bit about your time on the X-20 and how you felt about that related to the X-15.
I got pulled off at that time to work on dinosaur program and spent most of my time traveling from Kennedy to Wright-Patterson to Boeing and such, and I just didn't get on it as much as I'd like to have. It looked like a good program,
Yeah.
but I don't regret being on the dinosaur program or
Yeah.
the shuttle programs that,
Yeah. How long did you spend on Dinosaur?
until it got canceled. Actually, I wish it had continued because it was a great program, but we launched a pod down thing, so they decided they'd go further, and then we went around the Earth once. They decided that they would go around 3 or 4 times. These are military decisions. Boeing didn't wish it, and the others, and I think by the time we went around Earth, they decided they were going to do a moon landing. And it got canceled, but the program actually would have really saved us a lot of trouble if it had gone through, because it was a 2-man rescue type vehicle. I mean, it would have been great, take a lot less long launching, and I always regret that the dinosaur program was canceled, but and not because of the program, but because of people who wanted more and more titles, headlines, I should say. But,
Yeah.
so can't give you anything on the X-20 too much.
Okay. Did you work with Johnny Armstrong on that? I know he
Oh,
was on
yes.
X-20. Yeah. Yeah.
Had some very fine times at various places. Very fine person.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a great guy. I know we talked earlier about artifacts you might have kept. I think Johnny has, at least what I've seen, the most unusual artifact from the X-15. He's got the nose of the ramjet that was burned off from the Mach 6.7 flight. I remember I was out there interviewing him, and he had that thing still in his drawer. He pulled it out. Here, you want to see it? Yeah. Because he's the one who found the ramjet. He figured out where it popped off and went out and located it. So, yeah, definitely an interesting thing to have in your collection. Yeah. Let's see. Did I ask everybody about, I think I got everybody on your little favorite stories on the X-15. Just in relation to how would you relate the X-15 to the space program in general? Obviously, the X-15 was originally meant to put the first people in space, and then it sort of got jumped over by Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, things like that, because they thought they could do it quicker. Do you think that we went down the wrong path? Should we have kept with the X-15 type program, X-20, those types of things? And where do you think about the way the program is going today? Any comments?
Well, I think the X-15 got data that we needed to build the shuttle. And I'm not
Definitely.
saying we couldn't have built the shuttle without the X-15, but it would have been more risk and a longer time getting it flight tested. So I think the X-15 was a stepping stone into lifting entry orbital vehicles, and the space shuttle is a lifting entry orbital vehicle.
Well, the ball nose alone was a step that I think contributed heavily to the shuttle. I mean, they weren't going to use it, some of the people from Houston, and they thought, well, we don't really need a ball nose, and they thought it over and came back and agreed they'd use it, but they were just going to fly the pilot blind on an inertial guidance system, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But,
I understand the ball nose was actually used on the Apollo program. It's up on the very tip on the escape probe there, on the escape system. Was that right? Yeah.
I don't recollect that at all.
Okay.
It's, you know, we had one of the important things on the Apollo, of course, was the escape system.
Right.
And that was a really unique design. Somebody really did some work on that. And the sequence had to be exact, of course. One of the more important things about launching the vehicle was the sequence of what happened when, separations, etc. It was a very enjoyable program. One of the guys that worked for me worked on it for a while. I enjoyed it.
Okay.
What?
Epoxy, was that the first time they used epoxy? When they glued the string gauges on, or was that already in the works a long time before?
I don't recall.
I thought, wasn't there a guy out there that uses that epoxy to glue his steering wheel back together or something? Remember?
I don't recall.
Don, do you recall that? There's asking if the epoxy or using the epoxy that was the first used on the X-15 for putting strain gauges and things on. Is that the first time it had been done? I guess.
That's what I remember you talking about.
No, we used epoxy very early.
We did?
When I started to work in 53, 54, 55, we were using that with the Bakelite gauges. Yeah.
That was Bakelite in those days.
Yeah.
Now, during a flight or preparation for a flight, what would be your responsibilities and stuff? Were you more in general on the program, or did you get involved with specific things on specific flights? Terry, how about you?
Oh gosh, we're going way back. Well, at times I scheduled rocket sondes and so forth over PMR, Point Magoo. Let's see, what else did I do? Sort of had to touch bases with preparations for all the weather stuff. Make sure the weather people at the AFFTC knew about the flights. They were usually scheduled by operations, but I would tell operations and follow through and make sure we're going to get all our data, that sort of thing. balloon data, Arcus rocket data. I guess we got data over at Tonopah from the times. Anyway, so there was coordination like that involved before the flights. And of course, after the flights, on the X-15 program, there was always a pressure to get this stuff worked up in a hurry. That meant like 24 hours. So there's a lot of working nights, staying all night, working.
How about coming in early at 4 o'clock in the
4
morning?
o'clock in the morning for
Yeah.
flights.
That was natural, I think,
Yeah.
after a while. You know.
Then the press would be there. If it was a special flight, high altitude flight or maximum speed flight, whatever. Press would be out there. And they'd be knocking on our door, and well, anyway, not them, but somebody would say, "Larson, you better get this stuff worked up. We need some numbers." So, or whoever was responsible. Many times it was me. So there's always pressure on not always, but at times there's that pressure to get the data out and make sure everything worked.
Did you often go out for the flights themselves to actually watch the flights, watch the flight
I was in the
preparation?
control room a lot.
Yeah.
Just sitting there usually, just.
I'm curious as to know if, trying to get the environment down for
Yeah.
like during the flight preparation and stuff. I think it was Pete Everest wrote his book, and he talked about how you could hear the sounds of loading the fuel. You had this high-pitched scream and stuff as the fuel was being loaded and vented off, and it would start very early in the morning and things like that. Was there any things like that associated with the X-15, sound sites that you would recognize for that?
Yeah, there were arguments between Ron Waite
Arguments.
Oh, okay.
That's a high-pitched scream?
Don't prove that.
Okay.
Well,
That was, one of the things I was gonna say though was engine runs. We used to take the airplanes down to the PSTS and
Yeah.
tie them down and run the engine. And guys would go out and do leak checks with it in prime. You think about it now and you think, my God, how did we ever let anyone get that close to it? And one of the guys had found he could stop a leak by just spraying some water on it because it was all it was all so cold. Everything was cryogenic, and if you could see a little bit of gas coming out of a seam or something, well, you'd spray a little water on it and it'd freeze up solid, and that'd
Yeah.
stop the leak. I don't know how long he did that before somebody else figured it out and told him not to do that anymore, to report it.
Yeah.
It was.
Definite example of the type of thing you would not be allowed to do today.
Well, going out, the place, I don't know whether you've ever been down there or not, but it had the blockhouse, and the majority of the people would be in there, but there were the pillboxes. There were like 3 pillboxes out around the airplane. And they had thick glass windows and doors that closed. And everything was fine until you had an ammonia spill, and then that was pretty bad. And everybody would scramble trying to get away from it.
Yeah.
But we'd send in the leak checkers. We'd get the airplane to a certain place, and the leak checkers would go in and physically look to see whether they could see anything leak. And then they would clear, and then we would call them, and they'd go ahead and light off the engine.
Yeah. How loud was it when the engine was going?
Very.
Yeah.
I mean, that was appreciable.
Yeah.
You didn't have to look to know that it was running. I mean, it was,
You could hear it all over the base.
yeah, in the blockhouse real well, and you could hear it up in the building.
Yeah, I'm
which was a
not
mile.
sure that would pass environmental specs anyway.
Well, we did that. I mean, that was done with the old Dash 11 engines, with the X1s, and right up the line. Everybody expected you to take an airplane down there and run it, and we actually built a test stand to run the engines before for the Dash 11. I know that, and they did that for the Dash 99s. And it was kind of a out of the way type of activity, and nobody really pressed it. And
I've heard a lot of people talk about it since then, and I've thought about that now, and I thought, boy, you know, those are the kind of things that probably made the program go, because we kept a lot of things from going out that were bad, but it was probably pretty dangerous to do it that way. And it would have been really terrible to try to do that remotely.
You use your
Yeah.
initiative
Yeah, it's,
as necessary. Get it
yeah,
done.
and there was a
Yeah.
lot of that went on a daily basis, I think, throughout the center. It was, people took on the initiative to go out and find out about things, and but that's one big thing that you can identify and say,
Boy, it's great
Man,
when the
that's-
program's just getting started. Money flows free, authority is kind of loose.
Yeah.
You can
yeah.
accomplish a hell of a lot. That's what we did when we first got started on the
Well, that was
programs.
pretty much the whole
Gemini.
program.
Yeah.
The whole program, it didn't really get tough
Well, we
about
didn't-
all that kind of stuff until, well, the last couple of years, I think.
Well, we didn't have headquarters breathing down our neck. We had Paul Bickle, and he was the guy that you had to test everything with, and he decided what headquarters found out about. And it was, a lot of it was settled right there at the place, you know, I mean, it was done quietly. You know, we had the wooden lifting body ready to fly before headquarters even knew that we were working on it.
Teague was inspecting it for damage, and he never found any damage.
Yeah, well, I was talking about the wooden one, the first one, you know, the M2F1.
Yeah.
I mean, that one was,
Yeah.
we had a glider outfit build the wooden part of it.
Towed it behind a car, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
how about the paraglider thing?
Yeah, well,
That was done during, most of that was done during Christmas vacation when there
Yeah.
wasn't anybody around to question it.
there were enough to give me hell when I couldn't pull a pin.
You talked about Paul Bickle. Did you know him?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
He was a
mover.
a mover. And in fact, one of the best things I ever heard said by anybody out there was him. Somebody said something about how can you make decisions, and he says, that's my job. He said, my job is to make decisions and get the programs going again. He said, because every now and then you guys come up with something that you can't quite solve, and it's going to come down to, well, we can either spend 10 years and a lot of money to try to get an answer, or we can decide to go or not go. And he said, if I tell you to go, he says, that's a decision I make. And he says, I hope that I make a lot of good ones. He said, at least I hope I make more than 50% right. Because he said, it'd be really terrible to be less than 50%. And I thought about it a lot of times, and I thought, you know, that guy, he really understood, and he knew that a lot of it was beyond us yet. We didn't understand. We wouldn't get the data until we went out and tried it.
You know, Walt Williams said that when he first started out here at Edwards, he was really scared when they talked about cutting holes in the plane. But and he was very cautious initially, but then they took care of it. They knew what they were doing and they did it. But it took a learning period.
Yeah.
Well, when Walt Williams and Bo Bickle got out of the scene, everything since then has been done by committee.
Yeah.
There's 15 people that can say no, but not a single one that can say do it.
Yeah.
And that's when I retired.
Yeah.
When I got to the point where you spent all your time and energy trying to convince this group to let you go to the next group, to let you go to the next group. Any one of them could kill it, but not a one of them could say do it.
We spent like $250,000 to $300,000 developing a nuclear gauging system for the tanks in the rockets, so they wouldn't have to pulse it to push the fuel back where they can measure how much they've got left when they're
Yeah.
yeah. And we had committee after committee talk about it. And at the end, when we proved how accurate it could be, they threw it out because radiation, if they had an accident, like one of these, like they did have, this radioactive material would be spread around, but it was very low radiation level. They're so afraid of that. I don't understand that. It's like the nuclear reactors we could have for our generation of power. We're way behind France and even Japan.
And we can't even get a gasoline refinery going in California.
Then not only that, they close them down.
Yeah, that's
They
the ones they
close
had.
them down.
I think unfortunately there's a general lack of science understanding through most of the public here in America. So they don't understand nuclear reactors and things like that, and they get scared of things they don't understand. And of course, somebody goes out there, it's like the SST, being shot down and stuff by, people who definitely, in a lot of cases, didn't understand what they were talking about, but everybody listened to them because they got airtime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put it at their center. You get anything done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if you try to do something good, like, never mind. I get into politics now.
Well, in politics, I retired because they moved headquarters to Washington, and we'd get a good project we wanted to do, like Dan mentioned, and they'd micro-position us and say, no, develop a transducer. Sure enough, you could find out that some pressure company had a transducer they wanted to sell us, and that was my development program.
Yeah.
I had a program that 5 nations were interested in, and the Air Force is willing to donate laser gyros. They wouldn't let me do it. It made an inertial guidance system that was still beyond our capabilities.
Wow.
And I thought, the heck with this.
Yeah.
So I just quit.
We had a different situation when we were growing. The contractors wouldn't stay away. We'd have more contractors flooding in, trying to practically give us something to test.
Yeah.
It proves their device is better than anybody else. In fact, almost for every type of instrument that we were interested in, or phenomena we were interested in, we'd have maybe 3 vendors that were working in that field. And they'd come in and tell us about what their system would do. And in a short time, we knew probably more than those contractors knew, because we had that coverage. And it went one after another, attitude, acceleration, various other computers, for instance, the IBM computers we used on the Apollo. We used on the Apollo. Not on the Apollo, on the shuttle. I get those programs confused sometimes. I only spent a short time on a shuttle. But anyway, they couldn't have enough. They kept inviting us out to have lunch, and wanted to go even further. And that had to be stopped.
Yeah.
Because it was felt that we would be influenced by what they did for us. So it was, and then they started exerting control after we had already gone through this period. If they had done that in the beginning, we would have never made that landing on the moon in the decade. But it was really something. It was pleasant to work with those people. It was almost mind expanding.
They did get where you really couldn't get in.
One area, and then another area, and then another area they covered.
Great.
That's one thing I really enjoyed about working at Johnson Space Craft Center.
During your time on the program, did anybody ever go out to the high-range locations, or did you go out to any of the emergency lake beds if there was a landing that occurred off base?
We had a complete flight control room uprange quite often, either at Ely, Nevada or at Beatty, Nevada.
Uh-huh.
So we sent a whole control room full of people up to one of those two sites and maybe to both of them, I don't remember.
Just one, I think. I don't know where it was,
Yeah.
which angle it was.
Depending on the trajectory, depending on how the emergency landing sites were picked for that particular flight.
Dick Day has
Well-
died.
Huh?
Dick Day died, didn't he?
Yeah.
That's too bad. Because he knew where Randy Franklin was, and Randy Franklin did know a heck of a lot about the high range. But he's in Houston someplace, if he hasn't died. He was in a wheelchair last time I heard.
He's probably gone to his great reward.
Yeah. Did you go up to the high range?
I
or
went,
the lake
well, I
bed?
went up to Mud Lake. We had I was up there a couple of times. We landed, Jack McKay landed up there once.
Is that the rollover accident?
Yeah, and I'd been there just a short time, and the whole group of us went up and we surveyed all of the parts that were scattered all over the place and plotted them on a map to help try to figure out what all had happened in what order. And that was just a kind of like a one tremendously long day of being up there. And then when I was on that program in control of an airplane, Pete Knight landed at Mud Lake after a complete electrical failure. That was Flight 173. And I went up and rode back with the guys. And that was quite an experience. I mean, the ground crew had been doing that for each time they had to bring an airplane back. But because I was kind of new on the program, I said, hey, I want to do it. I want to go with you. So they said, you're crazy, but here's a seat. And I found out what it was like to drive through Nevada on July 4th at 110 degrees, no air conditioning. I leaned over to talk to the guy beside me, and I laid my hand on the drinking water can and burned it.
Oh.
I mean, the lid on there was so hot that it felt like I had really blistered myself. And
Yeah.
but it was.
Was that the trip that the gal ran into the
No,
wing of the?
no.
I was just gonna ask that
X-15
one,
like
actually.
No, that was a different trip, but I mean, it could have been, you know, it was that type of trip. They were making like 8 miles an hour up some of those grades. It's a truck, because X-15 was like 15,000 pounds empty, and you loaded it on the back of a semi, and then you hung all the paraphernalia on the wings and stuff, so that people. I mean, you were driving on these very narrow 2-lane roads, and so if you met somebody, you know, you had to practically get off in the ditch with the truck, to keep from taking the top off of their vehicle if it was a tall one, with the wing of the airplane, and but mostly there wasn't hardly anybody there. I remember we got passed by one car and we all noticed the windows were rolled up. That meant they had air. that was the big thing we remembered.
You were envious of them.
Yeah. It was a 2-day trip from Mud Lake down to Edwards.
Did you go up through Tonopah and down, or?
We started, well, you came out of Mud Lake, you went to Tonopah to get to a highway, really.
Yeah.
And then we came down through a bunch of country that I've never seen since. But it was very intriguing. I keep threatening my wife to go up there sometime, and she keeps threatening to divorce me. We eventually got down to, right just about dark, we got down just out of Baker. And we turned and went across the end of, is that Silver there?
Silver.
Yeah. Went across there and up through the gate into Camp Irwin, the Army base there.
Or Goldstone is?
And that was amazing. We drove in there, the sun was just setting, and there were all these tanks sitting there facing each other all down the road. And I turned to Herman Dorr and said, you watch that side and I'll watch this side. If you see anything moving, well, tell me. I had this feeling that we were intruding in somebody's war. And that's what they did. They would go out there and maneuver and everything and practice, and then they would just shut down, and everybody'd go home for dinner,
and sleep and come out the next morning and they'd blow the whistle and they'd start up again.
The
And
war is on.
the war was on. But we got there during the dead period.
You spent the night at Fort Irwin?
No, we drove in there and parked, and they brought some APs out and said they would guard the truck. And we went into Barstow and got a hotel motel.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
spent the night,
Yeah.
went back out early the next morning. But that's you know, there were some people who got really good at that, at going up there and retrieving an airplane. They'd borrow a crane or something from the atomic boys up there. They'd come down and, you know, I laughed when Ron Waite told the story, and then I would sit there and watch it happen. The guy comes out there, you know, and he takes a look at the airplane, and it's like, oh, this would be a piece of cake, and he hooks these. They get all hooked up to the sling, and he fires up and just practically kills his crane, you know, I mean, because he comes up against it and it just doesn't budge. It's heavy. And he's looking at it like it's an aluminum airplane, you know, and it's going to be a piece of cake to lift it onto the truck. And then the next time you see him, he gets more serious, and that time he lifted it.
Yeah.
But, you know, you know, I just kind of was along for the ride. Those guys knew what they were doing, and I didn't want to jump in and try to countermand. And once in a while, they'd get ready to do something, and I'd say, I think it's time for me to take a walk, because they weren't gonna, I mean, what they were gonna do, I wasn't gonna like. I knew that, but that was how they did it, and it was how you got it on the truck.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, that's part of it. And I think that's a lot of how the management at Dryden operated. There were a few key things that everybody knew was a little bit touchy, but somebody had figured out how to do it, and it seemed to work okay, and we let it go and do it because it had been done that way for a while, and we didn't have a better idea. You know, I mean, I can remember Air Force generals coming through on a tour, and they walked into the hangar and they saw some very expensive piece of an airplane laying on a cotton mattress on the floor. And they stood there and looked at that and they said, my God, that's ingenious. You know, they would have had a $50,000 stand sitting there holding it. Well, we only took that piece off once in a while, and the mattress would do it well, and we used it. And you know, and there were a lot of things that happened there that were done. I've had people accuse me of Dryden being the Kmart of flight test, you know, because it did things cheap. And it was always because we were at the tail end of the program. The flight, you know, all of the wind tunnels had been done and everything else. The flight program started at the end, when you actually had an airplane, and when the money was gone. So you had to kind of figure out how to get the flight done on the minimum amount of money and the easiest way. And there was a lot of that went into it. But the X-15, you know, it was a robust airplane, and there were a lot of things that happened though that didn't make a lot of publicity. But I remember the airplane coming back with cracks down those side fairings. I mean, it had tried to expand and there was no place to go, and it just buckled and broke. And we turned them into expansion joints. I mean, we figured that's where they wanted to break. It was not a load carrying thing, it was a thing to keep the heat off of the control cables and the joint. So we went ahead and milled them out and put covers over them.
So that was all done late. That was not part of the original design to have the expansion
Well,
joints there.
some of them were there.
Okay.
I mean, but there weren't enough. And there were some places that it was too long to have an expansion joint in it, and that's where they cracked.
Well, they had the same problem with the wing leading edge, because they didn't have enough expansion joints in that heat sink leading edge. You get buckling of the skin over every end of each segment.
So that's the kind of things I think that Dryden excelled at.
Well, you know, if you think back on it, if you had to do it by the book, which most things get to have done, even if you had the money in those days, the program would have never gotten off the ground. Because by the time you decide what needs to be done, go out for for a study contract, and then go out for a contract for the hardware, and then go through all the inspection process that you have to go through, and get it on the airplane, we'd have flown about twice a year.
Well, that's true.
Some flights we did, some
Well-
airplanes we didn't fly twice a year.
Yeah, but,
You know,
I mean,
if
you
you'd have
couldn't
done
have
all by the
scheduled
book,
any more than that,
the
because
book was
you
wrong
have a
then.
problem,
You
the
didn't
time
have
you
the
got a
right-
problem solved,
right,
the year would be up.
right
And,
data in it, you know, I mean, there was a lot of the data was changed after the flights, when they found out what was actually going on.
And half the cost is paperwork,
Yeah.
at least.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, definitely,
Well,
probably a lot more than that.
So that's something you had to spend a lot of times on after the flights. Always was doing the reports. You talked about that a little bit. You know, you had to spend the night to reduce the data. Did you also do a lot of work after that? It's like you get the initial data out, then did you have to write longer reports and stuff? You might spend a few weeks
Oh, yeah.
on any individual flight.
Right, right.
Yeah.
You circulate it to other
Well, you had editorial
centers,
committees. and-
other centers even,
Oh, yeah.
and they give you
Radios.
Yeah, there was a lot of,
comments back.
A lot of work.
probably most of
Some
the people that
2
benefited
years
from the
without
data
report.
had looked at it before the
Take that
report
long
ever
to get
got
enough
out.
data to make it worth
You know
Oh,
what I
yeah,
mean?
but I mean,
Right.
even after,
In some
yeah,
cases.
that's true.
Yeah.
But after that phase, there was still take, because you had other things to do.
Well, and then you had the process, go
And
through
some
the
people-
report process,
Yeah.
the editing and
Well,
so on.
one thing on the X-15 program, we didn't really have a lot of computer technology,
Yeah.
if you think about it, at least in the beginning.
Well, we had the Friedens, we could make them
Yeah, we had the
play a
Friedens,
song.
right.
I remember that.
Yeah, when we had,
Yeah,
we had the film to read.
A lot of film to read. Tell me about it. These data sheets, that must have filled out several thousand.
It was all done by hand, though, the data reading in the early days.
What was that?
The data was all read by hand.
Yeah, they're read by
The
hand.
data gal.
And you worked up, you know, one point a second was a high rate.
Well,
When the computer came along, people were working with 200 samples per second. Are you kidding? You know, you're like, why 200?
but that was a problem I had when I was working in the dynamics field is, you know, once a second, you get something that's 13 cycles, is 15, 18 cycles a second. You don't get much data, you're just reading every second.
That's right.
And trying to figure out how to do that, and we had a lot of problems with the data. I remember one time one of Joe Walker's flight, he started screaming on the radio, he got this vibration, and everybody looked at the accelerometer data that was telemetered. Well, it was only telemetered at 10 samples a second.
Mm-hmm.
And what was shown on the printout chart was something like this, and we got an argument between the controller, I don't know who was doing the controller, and Joe. Joe said it's not that, it's a high frequency. It's not.
Yeah.
So we get back, and what happened was, it was aliasing. It was actually 13 cycles, but they were sampling at 10 a second.
Yeah.
So it came out on the record as a 3 cycles. So we had a lot of little incidents like that.
Yeah. It was a big change when we went from the onboard recorders to the PCMs.
Yeah, we got the high-speed telemeter stuff. And it
That's one of the reasons I left there.
Doesn't
I
everyday
recommend
life
the
seem a
PCM.
little boring to you?
Nobody
When
wanted
you
to
don't
talk.
have these
Yeah,
problems?
Ed Biddy and just
Do you
said
have
no.
problems in your everyday life too?
Well, I have a knack of coming up with more problems than I can solve. So I don't run out of problems. One of the guys, one time was, I mean, we were doing something, I don't remember what program it was. One of the guys came in the office one day and he says, I'm getting sick of this. And I said, what's the matter? He says, every time I turn around, he says, we got another problem. I said, man, you ought to be happy. It's the problems that keep us in business.
You mentioned PCM. What is PCM?
Pulse code modulation.
Yeah, there you
Okay.
go.
I should recognize that one.
Digital
Thank you.
transmission.
That's
Okay,
my
okay.
bedtime on that one.
Ah.
That's what I recommended to who was the?
Video?
Fidian.
Fidian.
Ed Fidian.
Yeah.
And he said, no, we can't do that, or something like that. And I said, well, that's fine. About a week later, I transferred out of the organization to the Space Task Group.
A more esoteric note, so to speak, the X-15 was got a lot of publicity when it was first starting out. It didn't get quite as much toward the end, except when there was some record or something that was brought out. But you always saw something in Life magazine, National Geographic. They had a lot of stuff on TV. Several NASA films were made on it, things like that. But of course, the most famous of all is they actually made a motion picture out of X-15. Were any of you guys involved in the program at the time that was being made? Do you remember anything about that at all?
Before I got there even.
No.
Like 61, 62, so.
Yeah. They didn't want any facts, they wanted to do it. It's typical movie, they didn't
Memorize
want
it.
for the facts, they just wanted to,
Yeah, get in there with their cameras.
yeah.
Get out.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know Milt was the technical advisor on that. Even appears in the movie a couple places, helping to put a guy in the cockpit and stuff like that.
There's several scenes that are kind of funny when you watch it. There'll be a big emergency going in the movie, and the guys in the control room are sitting there laughing with each other. You know?
Yeah.
They didn't necessarily line them up real well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was an interesting movie. I've heard a lot of comments on it and stuff. And I mean, you know, Charles Bronson is an X-15 pilot. I mean, how can you go wrong, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about on the X-15? Any special memories or impressions or anything like that that you'd like to share? How much did you guys work together when you were actually on the program? You know, you're all in the same room here today. Did you guys work together?
Not in the same room.
Yeah.
Merle and I worked together a lot. Don Cordes and I a little bit, and the other three, not at all.
Didn't notice it all.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's great you guys all get together now and stuff, and able to share memories and stuff, and keep together. You got the whole NASA groups. You got the breakfast group here, the one in Lancaster, and things like that. But, yeah,
I
they,
worked with Bill,
yeah.
Little League.
Ah,
Yeah.
Yeah, that was about it.
kids in the same team.
Yeah, we had the same team.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Actually, that's another question. Is, you know, what types of things did you do outside of the program? You know, you talked about some parties and stuff. If there was a major thing happen on the X-15, you had to have some.
Splashdowns.
Yeah.
It was that 45-minute drive across the burning desert to get to work.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah, that was-
Yeah, every morning.
An hour and a half every day
And,
traveling.
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half traveling.
To and from.
Yeah.
Remember the pictures at one of the reunions where they were showing the testing the engine and the guys are standing there like this?
Yeah.
Talking about safety.
Yeah, we're all deaf
Safety
too.
was-
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What was that?
They didn't worry about the fuel, afterburn, contamination, just the, you know, the ears and standing there watching it.
Ah. How'd you feel having your husband out there working on a program like this? Put you on the spot.
All I remember is him jumping out of a plane once. It was on the ground,
Oh.
and he caught his wedding ring on the something. And fortunately, he saved his finger, but he threw the ring away.
Well, I traveled quite a bit. And in the old days, right after I left here, we had a small airport close to Langley Field. And my boss would send me on a trip. And I'd get there just as the plane was starting to move. And they're pulling this thing back, you know, the stairs they normally in at that time. And I go running out, and hey. And he waved to the pilot. I don't know how the pilot saw him anyway, but they'd stop and I'd get on. It was pretty hectic because we were always rushed at that time. It was